Radio Jones with Pippa Jones.
Now then, we're going to move swiftly on because we've got a lot to cover. And the next guest that I have on is the wonderful Raymond Bechard, who's over in the United States. And we're going to be looking at the news that came out this week, although it's been going on for some time, certainly investigations and so on, into the disclosure of the paedophile rings who are accessing children online via webcams, of course, targeting remote areas of the world where the populations perhaps are compromised, and children who are from poor families have been subjected to horrendous ordeals. Their families have sold them to the paedophiles in the UK and the US and in other parts of Europe as well for their disgusting pleasure online. Now, it is an incredibly emotive issue. We'll be going to Raymond in a minute. Before we do so, I'd just like to bring you a statement from Stephanie McCourt, who is from the National Crime Agency in the United Kingdom. And the reason I want to play this, it's from her speaking on Sky News, is because it does at least get home the message that these paedophiles who are carrying out their dirty business online are not safe. The internet is not a safe place for these activities to be taking place. And God forbid, you know, as we speak now, children are being abused via the internet. And please God, we can find ways to ensure that no children have to be subjected to this horror, of which Raymond will be telling us a little bit more about very soon, but not before this.
National Crime Agency. Good work here, Stephanie. You've identified 139 suspects in Britain. What will happen to them? What happens next?
The investigation is ongoing into these suspects, and the work doesn't stop there as well. The National Crime Agency works with police forces all around the country to ensure that anyone that we identify who's responsible for this awful crime is brought to justice.
And the terrible thing is, you know, exactly how these people get their kicks. Can you tell us in broad terms what you suspect these people of doing?
They're going online, they're accessing people from all the way around the other side of the world. Organised crime networks are placing their own children or other street children in front of webcams in return for payment. So somebody in the UK will be sat in their homes, going onto these different sites where they meet these people, going onto the communication platforms and literally directing the sexual abuse for an amount of money of these children.
So they are pulling the strings, really. They give commands, and these commands are carried out at the other end of the camera.
That is exactly what happens. The customer base, as we can refer to it, the clients in effect here in the UK and in other countries around the world, are quite clearly creating the demand for this sort of abuse. If they weren't asking for this, then children would not be abused in this way.
But you know, all this work you do, does it have any effect on the operation in the Philippines, or does it only affect the subscribers?
It has a direct impact on so many different fronts. Firstly, for the children in the Philippines, those we identify, including the 15 that we identified and got safeguarded as a result of Operation Endeavour, do not have to suffer this sort of abuse anymore. The offenders, who are the facilitators and those responsible for putting children in front of those screens, will go to prison. And those here in the UK, like I said, providing that demand, will be identified, have been identified, will be arrested and investigated, and will face justice.
You see, I think it's very interesting when we talk about this and we see the work you're doing and the success, however small that success may be on a global scale, the effect this has on these depraved perverts who do what they do. The message I suppose you're sending out to them is, if you click on this, if you pay for this, there's a chance we can get you.
There's a very good chance that those people are on our lists right now. The internet is not a safe place for offenders. In this sort of case, not only are we following the internet trails, we're looking at the finances as well. We're also working with our international partners. Those include law enforcement agencies, but also industry and the online organisations as well as the charities on the ground in these countries. The internet isn't safe for these offenders. We're finding them, and we will continue to do so.
Well, now that's Stephanie McCourt speaking on Sky News from the National Crime Agency in the United Kingdom. But of course, this isn't a problem which is simply in the United Kingdom. It's an international problem. I have Raymond Bechard, who is author, producer and human rights advocate from the United States, on the line with me. Good afternoon, Raymond.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And lovely that you've joined us today. Got up early, especially to join us here. Thank you.
It's not that early.
No, it's not, actually. It's not. You should have been up for at least 2 hours by now.
Yeah, at least. I was listening with great interest to the statement you just played. Let me just call it a very optimistic outlook of the situation.
That's kind of what I was hoping you wouldn't say, but please continue.
Even to the point of being not realistic. To say that you're not safe online, no, it's not completely risk-free. However, you are, because of the hundreds of millions, perhaps over billions of people on the internet, the chances of being caught if you're paying to watch someone online or even a child online are very, very slim. Now, understand, the reason this Operation Endeavor took place was because a huge amount of this abuse was happening in a particular village in the Philippines. And many, many people within this village were selling their children and involved in it in multiple homes that had internet set up. So they saw it as a way to make money in impoverished areas. And everyone's talking about these impoverished areas and how they are most vulnerable. And they are. But I want to stress that it's not just impoverished areas, it's impoverished people. So they're putting together these dynamics from which these children are vulnerable. The demand side, we understand. No one really knows how many pedophiles are online and looking to see these children be abused online and willing to pay for it. But that happens all over the world. In Operation Endeavor, they found men in the UK, Australia, and here in the United States. Now, this happens in every country around the world, anywhere there's men online. It happened to be that the UK police went to do a routine check on a man in Britain and looked at his computer and found a great deal of information and data about going towards this one village in the Philippines. So, and his communications with other men in the United States and Australia. They then worked with Philippines police to see what was coming out of this village, because all these men were talking about not only the amount of children available from this village, but it was so rife in this village that they were going to go there and set up their own internet cafe with these children and start to make money off of it instead of paying to see it.
That's right. He was looking to buy a house out there, wasn't he?
Yes,
in the village?
To do the very same thing. He was looking to get into the business instead of being a customer. He wanted to be the owner. So that's a big operation and somewhat easy to find, and that's why I think the optimism of this your previous commenter saying we're going to find you. Well, I understand she wants to strike fear in the heart of these pedophiles who are doing this. However, when we're looking at the impoverished nature from which the desperation of this often is derived, because in almost every instance here in the Philippines, in this case, the parents were simply bringing the children to these houses and waiting their turn and getting them online, and then they would make the money. There's no other way for them to make money. It's horrible. I mean, half these villages are perched on top of dumps and waste. But all over the world in every country, there are impoverished families, impoverished people with internet access. And these chat rooms, the areas on the internet where you can find these type of things are very easy to find, very easy to sign up for, very easy to make money. So wherever you find a family desperate for money who isn't terribly concerned about the welfare of their child, this is going to be happening. It's not a particular, think about it, Pippa, we're kind of using the same mentality that the pedophiles used. It's the Philippines. It's way over there in this impoverished community that's happening.
Yeah.
That's where it's coming from. So these guys were thinking, I'll never get caught, or she's not really being abused, or he's not really being abused, this child. It's way over there in the Philippines.
Oh, these are kids whose families have no access to resources should they want to make complaints.
Exactly. And
do you know, Raymond, I want you to just, if you could, sorry to interrupt you, I want you to repeat what you've just said there, because you've just taken me aback. You've quite shocked me in a very positive way, I hasten to add. And that is that, the way that we're perceiving this as something so far away in inaccessible, impoverished communities is the same mentality that the paedophiles have used. That's such a great way of getting home to the listeners that this isn't an issue which is just over there on the other side of the world.
Right. It's the same attitude that the pedophiles having. We're using it to make ourselves comfortable and to say it's another people's problem, poverty. But what I'm saying is that poverty exists everywhere. Here in the United States, I'm in the state of Connecticut, near New York, a very wealthy state. We just yesterday, a 16-year-old girl was in a motel and being forced to sell herself sexually. The police in that town, after they found her, brought in aid workers and counselors to the motel. They kept the girl in the motel for 5 days after they found her as bait to see if the pimp would show up or if other customers would show up. They didn't move her out of the place where she had been abused. They left her there with an aid worker. In Miami, just yesterday, Miami Beach, it's one of the highest tourism centers in the world. 13-year-old girl dancing in a well-known strip club, fully nude, 13 years old. She had been doing it for months and months and months. So it's not simply somewhere over there. It happens in the wealthiest areas because, as you know, in some of the wealthiest areas in the world, there's poverty across the street. And whenever you mix those two very close together, you're going to get this. There's great wealth in the Philippines, too.
Of course.
However, there's extraordinary poverty. And that's, of course, true in every country where there's great wealth and great poverty.
And, of course, one other thing, Raymond, is that, perhaps we're looking at those with the means to access their perverted desires. They have the means to do so via the internet because they have the money to pay for it. But let's be very clear about something, and that is perversity is not exclusive to those who have means to garner it. Perversity can exist in people, whether they're paupers or they're very, very rich.
Human nature and perversity, which sometimes comes along with it, pays no attention to geography, your culture, heritage, your economic ability, your profession, your education. It pays no attention to that. It is all people are subject to the types of illnesses or conditions to which this perversity and especially pedophilia come. And what we've found in our, and I've investigated this for a long time. There are certain common denominators with these men, many of them, who abuse these children in this way, but they are from every walk of life, from every nation, from every culture, every religion.
We have enough evidence, plenty of evidence, and it's been around for many years, that in certain Southeast Asian countries that it's fairly accepted knowledge that there are children who are kept enslaved for the reasons of men who want to procure sex from children. Somehow we don't feel that's as important or outrageous as if it's on our own doorstep. Explain that to us. Is it fear?
No, I think it's just ease. I think it's a tribal mentality. They don't look like me. Their skin isn't the same color. They don't talk the same language. They're very far away in a different culture. And we use all of those things as sort of safeguards to think that to depersonalize it from us, but also in a way, if you think about it, to almost dehumanize the victim. Especially if they're girls. The prevailing attitude of many of these people in many countries is that they simply are not worth as much as boys. So this type of thing is even more acceptable because of that dehumanization of the female. So it's really a separation that we use, and it's been used. That separation has been used in slavery throughout human history. Cultures always used other cultures for their slaves. They didn't enslave their own people. It was always some other people from far away that looked different, that spoke a different language, that were barbaric or worshipped a different god or spoke a different language. We did it in the United States to people from Africa. We did it to people who were Native American, and we saw as savages. It's always someone else that we enslave, and that through line of human nature continues to this day, because now we have the internet and we can go across the world and see people from a totally different place that aren't like us, and that's enough separation to dehumanize them and use them this way.
You've mentioned the internet. Let me ask you about that, because it seems that there is much more attention, much more mention in the news, especially in the mainstream media, of the issue of paedophilia. And I've heard many comments over the years of people who say, well, it's always been happening. It's no different to what it used to be. It's always been there. It's just that you have mass media now. I can't help feel, though, that the internet has been a tool which perhaps has allowed those of already a perverse disposition to seek out what they want, but moreover, those perhaps who through curiosity have looked at it and have found that it's triggered some spark in them, or those who've stumbled across it inadvertently who found that little spark has been triggered. I mean, it seems to me that the internet can only be adding to the problem that we have.
For people who say, well, it's always been around, the internet just hasn't really changed it that much, that's like saying, well, human traveling has always been around, airplanes haven't really changed it that much. So, no, the internet has completely changed it, has made it explode for a number of reasons. Pedophiles, especially when we're talking about those who like to look at images of children, they would have to often produce their own materials when it was just before digital media, and keep it to themselves. That was their currency. Very rarely could they trade or because they kept to themselves. They kept the secret to themselves. Now, through the internet, a number of things can happen. With almost total anonymity, they can communicate with other pedophiles around the world because translation software, they can speak to anybody. And their currency is now digital. They can trade and ask for certain things. These men who were using these children in the Philippines were literally sending objects, sex toys, if you will, to these children to have them use them on the internet. So the internet has been a complete game changer, as much as the internal combustion engine or the airplane was to our society. It has allowed them to practice their perversions, and yes, there are some people who stumble upon it, and because it's there, it's more available. They've gotten into it. I live in a part of the United States that didn't have any gambling for a long, long time. And when 2 large casinos opened up, everyone thought, well, there's not that many people who gamble. Well, they do now because there's 2 enormous casinos here, and they have millions of people visit there every year, people who didn't previously gamble. This has made it acceptable because so many people do it now. So many people are talking to each other and validating their perversions to each other, that it's in their own culture. Since they can validate each other, it's just absolutely exploding, the number of people who are involved.
Now, we have some issues here in the press of, it's an ongoing fallout from the Jimmy Savile saga, which I know you know very much, you know an awful lot about, Raymond. But we have 3 individuals now. I won't go into details, but anybody listening will know who I'm talking about. They're all actors or presenters who were around when I was a child. Icons in the entertainment industry, and they're on trial now for their misdemeanors with minors 20, 30, 40 years ago. Now, the British press loves the word historical child abuse. these men who let's assume, because no allegations have been made, let's assume that since those misdemeanors, those 30 or 40 years ago, have lived, a clean and honest and virtuous life, have done nothing wrong since then. They're being tried in retrospect, for crimes committed all those years ago with anonymous defendants. The people who are claiming that they were raped by these individuals are afforded anonymity.
Yeah.
We, as a society, certainly in the United Kingdom, seem to feel more comfortable thinking it's something in the past, something historical. What do you feel about the trial of men in that situation? Do you think it's correct that men who years and years afterwards should be put on trial so many years afterwards?
Oh, absolutely. Think of people who cold cases of homicide where they finally find someone who killed somebody years and years, decades ago. In the United States, we have Whitey Bulger, who was, who inspired Jack Nicholson's role in the movie The Departed. He's being tried for murders that happened decades ago. The people he killed are still dead. The families are still grieving. The children, victims, the anonymous victims of these men who are being tried in the UK, are still wounded, are still scarred, and will have to carry those scars with them the rest of their lives and have to deal with what happened to them the rest of their lives. So the crime, in that sense, is still going on because the wounds are still there. There's really no difference in the Roman Catholic priests who committed their abuse decades ago. And we have had some of those victims come forward and say, this is what happened to me. This is what still happens to me every day. The nightmares, my inability to have relationships, my fears, and the scars that they carry with them. Here's the thing. Those who committed the crimes are just as guilty now as they were when they committed them. Mm-hmm. Time did not erase that guilt. So to bring out the facts and to expose that guilt now is absolute justice, and it must be carried out.
Raymond, sorry, we haven't got much time left. I'd like to ask you to tell us, as a society, how we should be looking at this. What should we do? How can we try and ensure that our children are safe? What is it we can do?
Men need to start holding other men accountable. That's one thing. Men need to start saying, this isn't right. I was with some friends the other night, and we were just sitting at a restaurant, and one of the men got a text from a guy who was on vacation, and he made reference to how much many attractive women were around on the beach, and the way he described it was, I found it vulgar, but even the woman who was with us laughed at his text. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm probably being a buzzkill here, but that's really offensive. And if that guy, I don't have any friends that would text a thing like that to me. Mm. Men have to hold each other accountable for how they are towards women in their physical treatment, their emotional treatment, their everything. Secondly, we need all around the world, and I say this almost every time I'm on your show, we need to educate girls more. It's the education of girls that is going to be it's not a panacea completely, but it's pretty close. So men need to hold each other accountable. We need to educate girls at a very young age as to what they are, who they are, with their capabilities, their incredible gifts, and their potential. How much potential has been lost through the centuries because females were not allowed to use the gifts they were given. The inventions, the movement of the human story and the human condition forward, because half of humanity was oppressed. That has to stop around the world.
And Raymond, could you just refer people to your blog, please? Anybody who'd like to look into your work further? Certainly.
It's just RaymondBechard.com. I update it almost every day with human rights issues from around the world.
Really wonderful listening to you, as always, Raymond. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me back, and hope to talk to you soon.
Indeed.
Have a great day.
Thanks,
All right.
Raymond. Bye-bye.
Bye.